Hello, my name is Sarah England, and this is my presentation on Liz Rosenberg's Married Love. So before we can talk about married love, let's talk about Liz Rosenberg herself. She was born in Long Island, New York on February the 3rd, 1955. Her full name is Elizabeth Meg Rosenberg. Throughout her career, she never changed her last name. She's 70 years old. She's still alive and doing well. Um, Her first husband was the great novelist John Gardner, who some of you may know is the man who wrote Grendel. He wrote over 25 pieces, anything from novels that were nonfiction, fiction, bibliography. He wrote all kinds of stuff. Liz and John actually taught together at Binghamton University in New York for several years until he died in 1982. Her second husband was David Bosnick. They met in summer camp when they were 7 or 8 in New York, actually. And everything happened. He married somebody else, she married somebody else, and then fate brought them back together. They had 2 children, Eli and Lily. Before I start on this slide, I should have mentioned the previous slide, but I forgot. Liz's life information is really hard to come by. I use the websites Amazon.com. It's her storefront that has all of her books, and then the actual Binghamton University website. She hasn't written anything really about herself. You would think somebody who's published so many stories and novels and stuff, she would write like a little memoir or something, but I couldn't find any evidence that she had. She has written a few adult novels like The Moonlit Palace, The Laws of Gravity, Home Repair, What James Said, Beauty and Attention, Indigo Hill. She's wrote and edited some poetry books like Light Gathering Poems and Earth Shattering Poems. She has wrote several children's books, over 20 from what I could find. Those include Monster Mama, which is what her picture is here, and Moonbathing. So they weren't like, some of them are children's picture books, like some you would see in kindergarten classrooms, and some of them are more like children's chapter books, like 7th, not really 7th grade, probably 4th, 5th, 6th grade level books. And she's also written biographies. She wrote The House of Dreams, which is the life of Ellen Montgomery, which is the lady who wrote Anne of Green Gables. Within all this, she still teaches at Binghamton University in New York, which is where she taught with her first husband. She teaches creative writing there. So she has done a lot of things, but among those things, she has won several awards, such as the Fulbright Fellow, Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, IRA Children's Choice Award, Center for the Book Award, Atlantic First Award, NEH Fellowship, NEH Fellow Award. With a lot of those books, I found that she was up for a lot more awards. She just didn't necessarily get them. A lot of bestsellers, a lot of Amazon recognition and stuff. So she's put a good foot forward when it comes to novels and books and biographies and everything else she's done in her life. Now that we've learned a little bit about Liz, let's start with her poem, Married Love. The trees are uncurling their first green messages. Spring, and some man lets his arm brush my arm in a darkened theater. Faint-headed, I fight the throb. Later, I dream the gas attendant puts a cool hand on my breast, asking a question. Slowly, I rise to the surface of the dream, brushing his hand and my own heat away. Young, I burn to Mary. Mary, the smolder, goes underground, clutching at weeds, writhing everywhere. I'm trying to talk to a friend on burning issues, flaming from the feet up, drinking in his breath, touching his wrist. I want to grab the pretty woman on the street, seize the falcon by its neck, beat my way into whistling steam. I turn to you in the dark, O husband, watching your lit breath circle the pillow. Then you turn to me, throwing first one limb and then the other over me, in the easy brotherly lust of marriage. I cling to you as if I were a burning ship and you could save me, as if I won't go sliding down beneath you soon, as if our lives are made of rise and fall, and we could ride this out forever, with longing's thunder rolling heavy in our arms. Married Love is pretty transparent, even on its first reading, as to what it's talking about. But just like other things, novels, short stories, poetry, anything, there's much more to it than what meets the initial eye, and this, of course, is no exception. But as a brief overview, it's basically just about a married woman desires more in life than what her husband is currently giving her. Her intense sexual desire is almost at an animalistic level. So we're going to talk about some themes that I saw in the poem and some things that really stuck out to me. So this is definitely a love poem. based on the little bit that we've looked into, but is it a romance poem? Yes, it is a romance poem. Romance poem, romance story, anything like that is something that relies heavily on nature, emotion, natural beauty, and individualism. This poem in particular relies on a lot of emotion, emotional imagery, and nature itself. So lines 1 and 2 start us out with, the trees are uncurling their first green messages, spring. So whenever you see a season in a poem or a book or a short story, anything like that, a lot of times that season has a hidden meaning. In this case, it's spring. So when you think of spring, everything's coming alive, everything's blossoming, there's just rebirth, liveliness. So that tells us a lot about the speaker here. So this probably when she was a little bit younger, everything, love, lust, everything's coming together, everything's getting foggy. So this is when she first starts blossoming into who she is now. Then we go to lines 11 and 12, and it says, the smolder goes on underground, clutching at weeds, writhing everywhere. So to me, this imagery that she uses here gives me the idea of somebody buried underground, like something is she's trying to cover up this desire, this intense emotion that she's showing us. And then we go on to 17 and 18, and she says, seize the falcon neck. So of course falcon is nature, it's a bird, but it's a very predatory bird. As I said in my overview, her desires are almost animalistic. She's getting as she gets older, she's trying so hard to suppress all this, but she's getting very overwhelmed with all these emotions, and she's having these dreams, and she's just becoming overwhelmed that she's almost like she's willing to take on a predator at this point to get what she needs. And then the last lines 30 and 31 say, with longings, thunder rolling heavy in her arms. So when she says this, she's coming out of talking about writing this feeling out forever. So the end of this poem is a little bit hard to understand, especially in my opinion. But I think this is definitely the storm inside of her not overtaking, but it's being able to be relieved. She's getting what she needs in life, and she wants to hold on to that feeling, and she can feel it in her bones and feel it rolling through her like thunder rolling through the sky. Aside from the obvious romantic themes that married love gives us, there are also blatant themes of lust and commitment in this poem. The interesting thing about looking at lust and commitment in this poem is that they kind of correspond with each other. She has a moment of lust, and then she goes back to this commitment. Now, we don't really know what this commitment is. In the beginning, it's more like a commitment to deny this desire. And then as the poem goes on, she's married, and which we'll get into that here in a moment, but we don't ever really know what that commitment is exactly. It could be a religious commitment. It could be just a moral commitment. We don't really know in this situation. I wish that there was an author's explanation for this poem, because there are some pieces that I would really like to know what they meant in her words, but maybe we'll know one day. So going back to the lust themes, line 4 is a good example of this. So she's talking about she's in a theater, and this man touches her arm, and she gets faint-headed. All it took was one touch for her to get faint-headed, and she just falls into this lust. But then her commitment kicks in, and she fights this throb. She fights this lust. She knocks against it. And then in the next lines 5 through 7, she says, later I dream, the gas attendant puts a cold hand on my breast. So here's that lust back again. Even in her dreams, she can't get away from this lust, from this desire, from this want. But in the next lines, she wakes up and she brushes his hand away, and she brushes her own heat away. See, at this point, we haven't got her getting married yet. So it's some kind of own commitment she's made to herself to refuse this lust that just keeps honing in on her, even to the point where she's pushing dreams away. We know we can't control her dreams, but she is even determined to push the innocence of a dream away, even though it's not such an innocent dream. Back to the lust. She's talking to a friend, and she drinks in his breath, and she's touching his wrist. There's not a counterpart on commitment with that, but she doesn't go any further than that. She doesn't say that she gave in or that they did this and they did that. She just leaves it at the touching part, which is probably far enough. But then she goes on in 16 and 17 to say, I want to grab the pretty woman on the street. So once again, we don't have a commitment counterpart with this, but it doesn't go any further than that. She also adds this that she wants to seize the falcon by the neck, but we're not really sure if that's something pertaining to the woman or if that's just this lust coming out and that's the only way she can get rid of it. Then going back to commitment, the two parts that we have on commitment that doesn't feed into the lust side is that in line 10 she says, young, I burn to marry. So that kind of tells me that she maybe was waiting for marriage, or she had this commitment, or she, in her mind, morally, she didn't feel right acting on these desires unless she was married. So she burned to marry. She knew if she got married, hopefully she could quench these desires and get rid of these dreams and get rid of these faint-headed, throbbing ideas that come into her head. And then in line 24, she's talking about clinging. She says, I cling to you. She's referring to her husband in this section. So even though she's had all this lust throughout the years and she's had these desires and these opportunities and stuff, she still clings to her husband, to the idea that he's the one that can quench her desires. Unfortunately, I ran out of time, but overall, this is an intense poem with themes of a typical romance as well as themes of commitment and lust. There are many other themes in this poem, but as I said, unfortunately, I've run out of time. Thank you all for watching, and here's my work site.